This is a question that has likely entered your mind at least once by now. To answer it, in a nutshell, you should be looking for professional journal articles on various aspects of leadership, such as different styles of leadership. But not just any professional journal articles. These articles should be scholarly, come from a peer-reviewed publication, and be timely and relevant. So, what do we mean by scholarly and peer-reviewed? What are the characteristics of a journal article that is considered to be scholarly as opposed to, say, an article from a regular magazine? Consider this. Say you need a new pair of tennis shoes. You could certainly go to Walmart or any major department store and find a pair, but what if you need more than just a regular pair of tennis shoes? What if you're a serious runner and you need a good pair of running shoes? Well, congratulations! Consider yourself a serious runner. You are, after all, pursuing a master's degree. Serious runners will get their running shoes from a specialty store, one that specializes in high-quality shoes specifically designed for running and whose employees are highly trained and experienced in the sport. To complete the analogy, at this point in your academic studies, getting your running shoes from a department store would be like using an article from a regular magazine for one of your research assignments. It's just not going to cut it. Like your running shoes, you want to get your research articles from the best possible source. So you may be wondering, well, where can I find these sources? The short answer is the library's online research databases, which we'll discuss in more detail in a later video. But there's a bigger question you may be asking yourself. Once I find some articles, how will I know if they're scholarly and come from a peer-reviewed journal? To answer that question, we'll need to compare a popular magazine article with a scholarly peer-reviewed one so that, once you start using the library's databases, you'll be a more discerning researcher. Now, while most of our databases have a peer-reviewed checkbox that you can mark to limit your search to peer-reviewed publications only, it still doesn't guarantee that only such articles will come up, so you'll need to be prepared to use what you learn in this video series, along with your critical thinking skills, to discern what's peer-reviewed and what's not. So let's take a look at two articles, one from the magazine Psychology Today and one from the peer-reviewed journal Leadership and Organization Development Journal. There are several aspects of each article that we'll compare and contrast. They are the title, article abstract, the author or authors if there's more than one, the body of the article, and the list of references. We'll start with the title. From Psychology Today magazine, we have The Art of Influence. 4 simple words printed in bold and striking font against the backdrop of an artist's paint palette with a picture of someone whom we can presume to be a leader figure in the foreground and the article's subtitle in text boxes to the right. Very eye-catching. The reader immediately feels invited to turn the page and begin reading. From the Leadership and Organization Development Journal, we have Charismatic Leaders, the Role of Admiration and System Justification. It looks like it's your basic Times New Roman font, no pictures, no graphics. The title itself is much longer than our Psychology Today title. It contains 9 words. And if it sounds really technical, that's because, well, it is. The title, unlike our Psychology Today title, is packed with vocabulary that quickly and effectively conveys to the reader exactly what this article is about. No playing around here. Now, let's take a look at the article's abstracts. We'll start with our Leadership Journal's abstract. Now, an abstract, you'll remember, is simply a summary or synopsis of the article. Almost all peer-reviewed articles contain an abstract. Sometimes they're written by the author, and sometimes they're written by the publisher. And trust us, you'll come to find these abstracts very helpful. Here's why. When you begin searching the library's online databases, you'll be pulling up a lot of articles. Being able to quickly ascertain an article's relevance and usefulness is important. By clicking on the article's title, you'll be taken to another, more detailed page which contains the abstract. Reading the article's abstract will allow you to quickly decide if you want to invest more time in the article, either by reading it, saving it for later, or printing it out. Now let's take a look at the abstract for our Psychology Today article. Now, obviously the abstract couldn't be located on the first page. There's just no real estate left for it. Let's try the second page. There doesn't seem to be an abstract for this article. This actually isn't unusual. Popular magazine articles rarely, if ever, provide an abstract to their readers. The audience simply doesn't need it. Unlike you, they probably don't have a specific research goal they are trying to fulfill. They are likely just reading for pleasure. We'll move on to our authors. Again, we'll start with our peer-reviewed journal. As you can see, there's not one, but 3 authors for this article. This isn't unusual for peer-reviewed articles. Because of the academic rigor involved, getting an article published successfully in a peer-reviewed publication is a difficult and complex task that often takes more than one person. And you can tell exactly where they work. Notice all 3 of these authors are from a major university. Additionally, at the end of the article, we find further information about each of the authors. We learn their positions and what they do at Towson University. There's even direct contact information for one of them. Now let's take a look at Psychology Today. As far as we can tell, this article was written by one author. Again, because the lead page is taken up primarily by eye-catching graphics, there's no room left for much more than just the author's name. Let's see if we can find out anything else about her. At the end of the article, we find this. It states her position with Psychology Today, and there's some information about how she prepared to write this article, but there's nothing about her educational background, credentials, or how to contact her. Now let's take a look at the body of each article. You've probably guessed by now that the Leadership and Organization Development Journal article is going to be longer than our Psychology Today article. Our peer-reviewed journal article is a whopping 15 pages long, and this doesn't even include references, which we'll talk about in a moment. Most peer-reviewed articles have a very specific look, feel, and structure to them. There are certain things you should expect to see. For instance, as we scroll through this article, we see well-labeled sections such as Method, Results, and Discussion. We also see a flowchart, tables and mathematical formulae, graphs, and, not surprisingly, a lot of text. So, how about our Psychology Today article? We've seen the lead page. Let's start with page 2. There is some text on this page, but just doing a quick visual assessment, it looks as though as much as 50% of the page is taken up with graphics. Page 3 doesn't look to be much different. On page 4, we have what looks like a helpful chart, but it's comprised of text. No flowcharts or mathematical formulae here. And while this article does seem to have a structure, the labels aren't really labels. They're more like subsections or subtitles. Our 5th page has another large, eye-catching graphic. And, well, that's it. The 5th page was the last page of the article. The Psychology Today article seems to end abruptly, but what you'll notice with many popular magazines is the publisher typically places an end tag at the very end of the article. This is usually just the magazine's initials, in this case, PT. So, are you hanging in there? Great, because we're almost done. The last thing we'll take a look at in this video is references. We'll start with the Psychology Today article. Which is easy, because there are no references listed at the end of the article. So let's take a look at our peer-reviewed journal article. The list of references included at the end of a scholarly peer-reviewed journal article is simply a compilation of other works the author or authors used to perform their research. It's kind of like a list of ingredients, but with research instead of food. Other names you may have heard for such a list include bibliography, notes, and works cited. This list of references starts on the article's 16th page and continues for another 3 pages. If you were to count just how many sources in total are on this list, it would equal 66. Imagine preparing a dish with 66 ingredients. That would be quite an undertaking. So, what exactly are these ingredients or sources? Let's take a closer look by focusing in on a smaller snapshot of sources. When we look at the first source listed here, The Charismatic Bond, Political Behavior in Time of Crisis by Madsen and Snow, we see that it was published by a press, specifically the Harvard University Press, and the city and state where the press is located, Cambridge, Massachusetts, are listed. These 2 things tell us right away that this source is a book. We know it's not a website because there's no URL given, and we also know it's not a journal article because we don't see a volume or issue number. Our second source, however, The Intersection of Race and Gender in Election Coverage, What Happens When the Candidates Don't Fit Stereotypes, is a journal article. This we can tell by the fact that both volume and issue numbers are listed, and it's also helpful that the title of the journal itself, the Howard Journal of Communication, contains the word journal. Although beware, not all journal publishers will use the word journal as part of their publication's name, as you can see in the fourth source listed here. It is simply called Research in Organizational Behavior, but we can still easily tell it's a journal article because of the volume, issue, and page numbers listed. Now, here's something a little different. We have Reinventing Leadership, a radical social psychological approach in what appears to be another source called Social Psychology in Organizations, Advances in Theory and Research. A press is listed, Prentice Hall, and its city and state are listed. By all accounts, this would appear to be a book, and indeed it is. What's different about this book, though, is that the authors of our article only used one chapter from that book, and so when they put together their list of references, they wanted to make sure their audience understood they did not use the book in its entirety, only that single chapter. This is standard practice in professional level research and writing and a core value of academic integrity. Only cite that which you use. To sum up, this is a fairly good snapshot of the types of sources you will likely come across when looking at a list of references for a peer-reviewed journal article. The only other type of source not shown here that's worth a mention is the conference proceeding. This is simply the written version of someone's presentation at a professional conference, usually in the form of a paper that he or she would simply read to an audience while up at a lectern or podium. Notice what you don't see, though. No popular magazine articles, no websites, and certainly no Wikipedia. It's primarily just books, book chapters, and other peer-reviewed journal articles. And so that, in roughly 10 minutes, is the difference between the characteristics of a popular magazine article and a peer-reviewed journal article. To sum up, peer-reviewed journal articles will typically bear titles that are longer, include some technical jargon, and are highly descriptive of the article's content. They will almost always contain an abstract or a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of the article, which will help you to quickly decide if that article is useful to you. A peer-reviewed journal article will typically have more than one author, and you should be able to find out about those authors, their credentials, background information, and even contact information. While popular magazine articles tend to be short, peer-reviewed articles are typically much longer, often contain raw data, and are very well structured and organized, usually bearing labels as opposed to subtitles. And finally, a peer-reviewed article will always have a list of sources at the end, usually called references. Sources include books and book chapters, other peer-reviewed articles, and conference proceedings. Very rarely will you see websites. Popular magazine articles usually do not have a list of references. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to contact a librarian. We're always glad to help.